Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this week's Parsha Shir, Wednesday night Parsha Shir, Congregation KINS. And this week we, of course, will be focusing actually two things. One is on Pesach a little bit, and the other is on the concept of korbanot. So let us begin with Pesach and discuss just a bit what we should as people remember, not necessarily the halachot. I can simply say that, when it comes to what constitutes matzah and what constitutes chametz, I have a little acronym which I call them the browse grains. B is for barley, R is for rye, O is for oats, the W is for wheat, and S is for spelt. And that would be the brown, BROWS, browse grains. And one of the most important elements that we could learn from the fact that these are the grains that can become chametz if they come in contact with water for a period of time, which is beyond 18 minutes, without being fully cooked. So they become chametz. They become the very vein, the very grain, or the very food which we as Jews find repulsive on these 8 days. On the other hand, those very same grains, the browse grains, B for barley, R for rye, O for oats, W for wheat, and S for spelt, the browse grains, those very grains are the only grains that can become a matzah, which is the most holy of foods that we Jews outside of the Beis HaMikdash can eat. And so the question is, how does that work? That the very same grain that can become detestable is the same grain which is the most sacred food that we eat outside of the Beit HaMikdash. I think the answer is that the Torah teaches us a lesson. And that lesson is that most things in life are parut. They gain their sanctity or their despicable nature is by what we do with them. It doesn't matter whether it's money or whether it's work or whether it is any human engagement actually derives its importance, its creativeness, its creation, and purpose by what we do with it. So I think that's one of the most important lessons of Pesach, and that is that the very food, the very grain that we use, that we have, can either make the most sacred of foods, and therefore maybe the most sacred acts of human beings, or the most vulgar of things. Of course, a cheese sandwich in the middle of March is not vulgar, it's not bad, it's perfectly fine. But on Pesach, it becomes detestable. So that, I think, is an important lesson. Now, another thing that we have, of course, is the question of time on Pesach. Many mitzvot on Pesach, before Pesach, are time-oriented. And that, I think, has to do with the going from slavery to freedom, when a slave has no need for time. Pretty much the idea that to a slave, time is meaningless. Whether the master asks for it to be, demands of him to work at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m, that doesn't matter. He has to follow the command of the master. And so the Torah gave us the mitzvah, first of all, of counting time, that Nisan is the first of the months, because we are now going to be in charge of time. So many mitzvot that we have are dependent upon time. I once read a drasha by Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik. He said, if 9:13 a.m. is Kriyat Shema, that's the end of the time of Kriyat Shema, so at 9:12, we fulfilled one of the most sacred mitzvot. But if we say it at 9:14, what we've done is we've read a few lines of Torah, which is very, very nice, very good, but it is not the mitzvah of Kriyat Shema. And I think we as Jews, Kadosh Baruch Hu actually got us used to the idea of marking time, marking hours, minutes even, months, years, all of those things he put us in charge of. And that, of course, along with that, that has given us a tremendous sense of responsibility and stability. So there are so many different things that we can talk about when we talk about Pesach. It's pretty much endless. I'll end this aspect of our discussion today with the idea, and I've mentioned this in the past, that the question people ask is when the Agada says to us that we have b'chol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo. In every generation, a person has to see himself or herself ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim, as if he left Mitzrayim. That in itself is almost impossible. How can that be? I was never in Auschwitz. I thank Hashem that I was born into freedom, and I was born into the opportunity to live my life, hopefully in a sacred way, wherever I go. You, I'm sure, is also the same thing. So how can I can't even imagine Auschwitz. But, and certainly I cannot put myself in the place of leaving Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim itself is not only horrifying, but it's also more than 3,000 years ago. So what's the point of this? In every generation, a person should see himself as leaving Mitzrayim. Now, Rav Kook said that we shouldn't view Yetziat Mitzrayim as an event. We should see it as a process, that in each and every generation, it unfolds more. It brings us closer and closer to the ultimate Geula. Mitzrayim, of course, is something that we must and should remember because of the drama that was involved, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is involved in every element of our lives here, was involved in what we would call, of course, a Nes Gluya, Nes Golun, something which anybody who is there realized that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was involved in that. So indeed, you needed a very powerful thrust to get us onto this journey, this thousands of years journey, which we take. And each element of the journey brings us closer, even though we don't always realize it, but brings us closer to the ultimate Geula. And I think the idea that, although I didn't see it in Rav Kook's statement, but I think that answers another question, and that is, why does the Haggadah say b'chol dor vador chayav? Person is obligated. Just simply say every person is obligated to see himself, herself, as if they personally are redeemed from Mitzrayim. What does it mean? B'chol dor vador. Rav Kook's statement answers that question. That every generation brings new opportunities for us to appreciate the personal involvement of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Klal Yisrael's long journey, but nevertheless journey to this specific point, the point of our Geula. And so therefore, I think that phrase, B'chol dor v'dor, is absolutely essential in our understanding, because I'm sitting here in America, that's the location, and I'm in the year 5783, and that's the time, place. This time in this place is not the same as 100 years ago in Minsk or in any other place. And so therefore, every place, every Jewish society has its own challenges as well as its own contributions that it can make in order to move the Geula process along. So I hope that will help to illuminate a little bit. Kadosh Baruch Hu, when we say Kadosh Baruch Hu has time, that's a misstatement, of course. Kadosh Baruch Hu is above time. But nevertheless, we need time, and we need to be able to see from the perspective of our time and place in which we live, what we can do to bring about the Geula. And you can see, by the way, every generation has its contributors to that movement. So, Chazal tell us, nitkatnu hadorot. The generations are getting successively smaller, so to speak. The generation of the Vilna Gaon was greater than our generation. And the generation of the Shulchan Aruch was greater than the Vilna Gaon's generation or other generations. And so the Gemara says that the saying is nitkatnu adorot, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we are less intelligent. That intelligence is only one factor in establishing greatness of a human being or of a society, the intellect. But really, what makes a society great is accomplishment. What makes it able to continue to bring vibrancy to the Jewish people, to, again, ultimately to the ultimate end of the process, which is the Geula, which now brings me to the Rambam. Rav Moshe ben Maimon, who was born in 1135, 1135, and he died in 1205. He was nifter in 1205. And he, of course, did great action to move our process of redemption, the Geula process, on. In every generation, as the Haggadah says, Hashem sends us a light. I want to give you an example. When we were at Har Sinai, the Jewish people, when we were at Har Sinai, there was a tremendous light that was there. The world was illuminated, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us Torah. And Chazal tell us that a simple maidservant who was ignorant and couldn't know, and nevertheless at that time was illuminated, both, of course, in terms of her sight, but also in terms of the ability to understand the Shekhinah to a tremendous degree, that she may well have seen and understood things that the greatest of the Nevi'im did not understand. As time went on, darkness set in. Each generation sets a darkness. Example, let's say two people are standing under a street light, but there's no street, it's just in the middle of the field. Take two people, and they both are going to, they're both going to read. So one person reads, let's say, all right, we'll make it a little more interesting. You have Einstein and Myers standing next to each other. So Einstein is doing what he does best, reading physics. Myers is doing maybe one of the things that he does best, and that's reading the sports section. So Einstein decides to walk. There's only one light in the area. So Einstein begins to walk 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet. And after a while, Einstein can no longer read. Why? Einstein didn't get dumber, right? But what happened was he was more in the darkness. That's what each successive generation of the Jewish people is we keep going into the darkness with each passing generation. So we need great inventions to help us to cope with the darkness. So there first, of course, not first, but there was Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. I'm giving an example. They weren't necessarily first. Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, who gave us the Mishnah. And then there's the Gemara, Rabbi, Abaya. That as we went on in generations and it got darker, we had another means to cope with the darkness. Then, of course, was the Rambam. And then after him came other great scholars who categorized and codified halacha so that we who are in the dark are more capable now of understanding. Again, the issue isn't whether we're smarter or less smart. The issue is the darkness and the greatness of the Rambam, and then, of course, the Shulchan Aruch, and then the Chavetz Chaim, and then the great Gedolim that we have today. They shed light in a time which is getting progressively dark because of the distance that we are from our scene. So today we're going to take a writing of the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim. Now, Moreh Nevuchim is in itself a controversial sefer. The Rambam himself, of course, is the acknowledged Bal Halacha. Many of the intricate shiurim that we have in yeshivot oftentimes just begin with a statement of the Rambam, the halacha, or maybe what appears to be two conflicting statements. And then the resolution of those two statements. So the Rambam, without question, is one of the greatest and most acknowledged of our Gedolim who shed light upon. And one of the greatest light, perhaps, that he shed was what we call the Mishnah Torah. That's where he was the first to actually codify all the halacha, every intricate halacha was categorized in his Sefer Mishnah Torah. And the more one studies that Sefer, the more one realizes what one does not know, and two, how much there is to learn. Now, we're not going to look at Mishnah Torah today. We're going to look at another work of the Rambam. And he makes the following statement. He says that you should know, he says, that Hashem is, of course, that Hashem created the world, and he is the one who is God, Bashamayim Imal, and we are obligated to serve him. And one of the ways we serve him, he says, is La'avdo b'chol levavchem. Serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with all of our heart. Now, what form does that take? That's really the question. What form does it take? Well, the Rambam, we know that we're now studying Sefer Vayikra, and even the Medrash calls this book Sefer Torat Kohanim, the laws of the Kohanim. What are the laws of the Kohanim? They deal with all of the procedures from the first rays of daylight all the way through the night that how the Beit HaMikdash was occupied. And it's interesting that the Rambam seems to say that the korbanot are themselves what we would call Plan B. The korbanot, which every day we say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will grant us to be able to bring the korbanot at the time of the Beit HaMikdash. But yet the Rambam seems to say that, not, he doesn't seem to say, he does say that actually korbanot were not the most profound form of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but they were, at the time of the giving of the Torah, they were the most expansive form of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But korbanot were really what he calls kavana shniya. He calls the korbanot are a secondary form, not the primary means by which we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course, that particular statement that the Rambam makes is something which has occupied the minds and the discussions of many great people afterward. And it wasn't just an off-the-cuff thought. He wrote actually much about it. And he in that he said he said it's not just korbanot. You see that there are other things or other mitzvot even that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us that are themselves to wean us away from perhaps something which was originally very correct, but over the course of time fell into incorrect. And he seems to believe that this is one of those things, because you could ask, well, wait a minute. Cain and Hevel brought a korban. It's from the earliest days of human beings. And of course, Noach brought a korban after he left the Teva. And then, of course, Avram Avinu brought korbanot. As soon as he got into Eretz Yisrael, he brought korbanot. And then, of course, we know in the Beit HaMikdash, korbanot were brought every day, every single day, morning and afternoon. Sometimes, well, they weren't brought at night, but they nevertheless, korbanot had the function of avoda during the night. So now the question is, how can the Rambam make that statement? Now, we know also the Rambam said that, there are other mitzvot that we have that are designed to wean us away from behavior which may have started correctly, but now may be misused. For example, the vadim, slavery. Slavery really has been abolished in every civilized area of the world now. And so, but yet the Torah devotes in Mishpatim, and certainly throughout Shas, we talk about Eved Ivri, Eved Kanani, we talk about all of those elements. So how can one say that it's only a temporary thing, that God is really weaning us away from it? Well, it seems that that's part of human nature. Part of human nature is that we, I don't want to get to korbanot just yet about that, but for example, whether it's slavery or certain sexual issues that the Torah permits, polygamy, other things, HaKadosh Baruch Hu realized he created us and the psychology of human beings. And the psychology of a human being is, it is impossible to go from 180 degrees immediately. If you can't do that as a human being, then you can't do that as a species as well. That basically is the idea. Rambam says, look, ideally, if a Navi would come to us now, say, you know what, here's the ideal way of serving a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Contemplation. Thinking of God as deeply as we can, and to understand and come to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As the Rambam himself calls it, hitbonenut, the idea of contemplation of the universe, how beautifully it's designed, and how in every step and every stage, everything has its component that functions within it. So if a person did that all the time, they would come to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's exactly what the Rambam says, even in Mishnah Torah. When a person contemplates the beauty of the universe, its vastness, its greatness, so he will come to love. But it's a process. It's a process. And so the Rambam believed that the same thing applies with korbanot. Korbanot, many people put korbanot at the most important thing they would do if they would go to the Beis HaMikdash. They'd sin, they'd bring a korban. And that many people then, and even now, look at the idea of whether it's an actual korban or some sort of of reparations to God. That's what I do when I do things wrong. So what can happen with a person is that the korban itself can, and in fact did become, over the course of generations, it became what I'll call ritualism. All mitzvot that Hashem gives us, and the Rambam says this as well, all the mitzvot are designed to make us better people. They are, while they have an end component to them, in other words, they are an end in themselves, valuable, important, but they are also a means to an end. So, for example, when I put on my tefillin in the morning, my tefillin that I have are not only an end in themselves, they certainly are. I didn't put on tefillin on a given day, so I would feel terrible. Why? Because I missed out on one of the reasons that I was created. But it's also a means to an end in the same way. Tefillin, when I wrap that tefillin around my arm and I contemplate and I think about the parshiot that are in the tefillin, that leads me to become a better person if I do it on a daily basis, whatever the mitzvah is. So every mitzvah has a means to an end as a component and is, in fact, then also an end in itself. The problem historically was in Klal Yisrael that korbanot for so many people became an end in itself. I did something wrong, or even if I didn't, I'm supposed to do this activity. I did it. Check it off. It's a checklist. It became an end in itself, and that is what I call ritualism. Rituals are extremely important because they lead us. They remind us of what we are supposed to be doing. But when mitzvot become solely an end in themselves, then we lose the component of using it as a vehicle to make us better people. That is the idea the Rambam seems to feel about korbanot. The korbanot have to be a means to an end. And if they are, then of course they're precisely what Hashem wants. But as it was in the time of the Torah, and certainly in the time of Klal Yisrael, in subsequent generations, the korbanot were an end in themselves. People just said, Lama, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, and it's quoted by Yeshayahu Hanavi, Lama li rov zivchechem yomar Hashem. Why do I need your korban? You think I need your korban? I don't need your korban. So, Ki Shmuel said that that listening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is greater than, or certainly preferable than, mizevach, bringing a korban. Doesn't mean, now of course, therefore the Rambam said that the korbanot themselves became a means, or were to be a means to make us better as human beings. What will be when the time of Mashiach is here? Well, that of course is also some speculation. It is alleged, I did not see it myself, that Rav Kook said that in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, for which we all desire, we'll be vegetarians. And I don't know what all the restaurants are going to do, but that's what Rav Kook said. At least it's alleged that he has said that. I think it's probably true, and it's enough of an accepted element. So the idea here is, again, the time of the giving of the Torah, it was an abused form of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose to wean us by doing what? By saying, I'm going to take all of these korbanot that you are bringing to Avodah Zarah, whether it's in Mitzrayim or else. What I'm going to do, I'm going to legislate. I'm going to restrict them. I'm going to give many, many laws and redirect them into a service to Hashem from a service to some God with a small g. That's the purpose, says the Rambam. Well, he writes on, may it be that this year is the last year that we don't bring the Korban Pesach, and next year, B'ez Hashem, whatever the form should be, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will will command us to bring the Korban Pesach in Yerushalayim as it was intended, and in that way, Mitzvah will be hopefully a much better life for all of us. This year, as you know, there's a great deal of difficulty going on in Eretz Yisrael, tremendous amount of difficulty going on. And by the way, there's plenty of blame to go around, but it's something that we have to daven for, that we should remember the dictum that that Torah's paths are paths of peace, and that Mir Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help and guide the leaders, as we say every single week in the Tefillah L'Shalom HaMedina. Shlach orcha v'amitcha rasha soreha v'yotzeh. We ask Hashem simply, send your light and your truth to their leaders, their officers and counselors, so that they will know what to do. I certainly don't know. And I don't think anybody else on earth intrinsically knows what to do. So therefore we need siyata d'shmaya. This be a time of siyata d'shmaya. And we're not going to meet now until the Wednesday after Pesach. Next time we're not going to meet this Wednesday and this coming Wednesday, and we'll meet the first Wednesday after Pesach. So I want to wish everybody good Shabbos and Chag Kosher V'Sameach.
Chag Kosher V'Sameach. Thank
Chag
you so
Kosher
much.
V'Sameach, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Very welcome. All the
Sure.
best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your wonderful learning.
My pleasure. Thank you for
Beautiful. Thanks so much. Chag Kosher